Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the demon god and loved Mei in secret part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please give me hype instead of comment and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto had been called by many titles, so many names. The glorious days in the elemental nations saw him lose much of his humanity to become a god, a demon, a messenger of death. The only thing that remained human about him was his relationship with Mei. Had it not been for the relationship with the Mizukage, he would have lost everything, including all his emotions. He killed for a living after all. There were so many things he did for power. He tortured his body many times during his hazardous training time. Kurama was always standing on the side with a needle of life once he did something ridiculous that ended with almost blowing his body apart. The Biju was always working overtime to heal his self-inflicted wounds that would kill a normal person. Kurama's chakra had so worked within his system on a daily basis that it had become part of him. Inside his chakra system, the vile demonic chakra of the Biju could be traced, mixing with his own. His body grew so much used to it that it no longer did him any damage as it was already in his system. Power was something he didn't lack, he had it in abundance. All that would not have mattered anyway, he would have eventually died sooner. 3 is a saying that everything has a price. The power he'd attained had cost him much of his lifespan. Despite having the Uzumaki genes and having the full power of Kurama inside of him, as well the Geto Mazo, it made no difference. He had put so much damage to his body during his training time that it reduced his lifespan by a great margin. His body couldn't keep wounds, but he got screwed by having his lifespan reduced each time he used Kurama's power to regenerate any damaged muscle. He tried working a Fuinjutsu to work around the problem, but all he ever got was the middle finger. After the battle with Nagato, he'd taken the Geto Mazo and buried it inside of him, in the depths of his soul. He'd thought that if he died with it, then the Jubi wouldn't be born again and it would increase his lifespan. But nothing worked for his favor. The Geto Mazo only stopped his body from showing signs of reduced lifespan. To be more precise, it stopped him from aging quickly, but it didn't change the reality. He was just wearing a genjutsu just like Tsunade did. That was the cost of the godly power he'd attained. Though he wished to live a better life than the previous life, nothing much had changed here. He was still a god, at least no longer a demon. The power he holds makes him question why he was brought into such a world. If he had been brought into this world to live peacefully, wouldn't it be better for him to have been stripped of his power? It would have made sense if it was like that. Naruto sighed as he looked above the clear sky, standing on top of a tree, within a large mountain. It has been more than 6 months since he used the god magic, or even his chakra. It has been that long since he raised his hand in preparing for a fight with someone. The environment he lived didn't need him to use any of that magic, and he enjoyed all the time that was available to him to read and develop better seals. He wanted to do some conditioning before moving on to solve problems. He was certain that he would be required to lift his hands, and as much as he was proud of his power, he had his pride to maintain. It would be an insult to his pride if he was embarrassed by mere evil mages. He was God after all. Naruto jumped down from the tree and landed down the ground. A clone puffed into existence beside him before it jumped away from him. I require something a bit serious, Naruto said to the clone. There are some tensions within my muscles. I want to relax them with a physical exercise. The clone looked up for a moment before it responded. This is a good place, it is away from civilization. We won't have anyone spying on us or interrupting our exercise. Naruto nodded. I specifically chose this place because of it, and the target is only a few hours away, when traveling through shinobi speeds. He didn't need to take a train to travel when he could move faster than the damn thing. He was used to running anyway, and it didn't hurt to see how his speed had dropped. The clone snapped its neck before disappearing in a blur, but it suddenly disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto sighed. This world certainly had a way of ruining things for him. Just when he thought he could get some free time, something appears in his radar. He wasn't looking for trouble or any sort problem to solve other than Ika's, and so he decided to stand still. A few minutes passed and Naruto waited, and waited, until birds starting filling the sky in numbers as heavy footsteps crushed down earth, knocking down trees in the side. Whatever it was that was coming towards him, it was coming fast and no doubt was big. The footsteps grew louder by the second and the sound of trees being knocked aside increased as Naruto continued his silent standstill. A large beast blew out from behind him and went straight at him. Judging by its look on the eyes, it wasn't expecting to see him nor had it sensed his presence. It had to be expected as he had been keeping a steady flow of his magic while focusing his senses on the danger that was coming from behind him. Despite its surprise at seeing him, the large beast didn't stop on its path, it continued to run straight him. Naruto still didn't make a move, he simply watched the beast move towards him in great speed. For something so big, it was way taller than him, he could probably reach just above its knees, it moved a lot faster than one would expect. The beast's large right claw formed a fist and it was sent straight him. Naruto quickly placed both his hands in front of him to form a defense from the large punch. Upon connecting with his hands, the punch sent the blonde sailing away towards the trees. Naruto broke through a few trees before he finally hit the last tree as the momentum forced by the powerful punch had lost its course. Naruto winced as he slid down the tree trunk. His back hurt like crap and if that punch had really hit his chest, he would have surely spat out some blood. The beast hit way harder than he'd anticipated. He'd come across a Vulcan, but it didn't hit this hard, and wasn't powerful as this monster. Once the blonde hit the ground, he looked up again as the beast is again charging it towards wherever it was going. Naruto was still on its path and judging by the look on its eyes, it didn't take that highly of him. The beast was upon him in a matter of seconds. This time, it threw a left punch at the blonde. Naruto again placed both his hands in front to block the punch. He had forgotten that behind him was a tree he didn't break after he was sent sailing. When the punch connected with his defense, it pushed him back, but Naruto hit the tree trunk behind him by his back. The beast threw another right punch at the blonde in blurring speed. Naruto avoided the punch by moving to his right side. The beast's punch crashed through the tree trunk, breaking the poor tree in half under its might. Naruto was just glad he had dodged that one or it would have hurt him. Standing a few feet away from the beast, Naruto asked, "Who are you?" Every world had its talking animals. When he had first seen a talking frog, toad, he had been greatly surprised since he hadn't been familiar with summons before Jiraiya showed them to him. This world had its own beasts and animals that spoke. He wasn't even surprised when he first saw a beast speaking. What could surprise him if he had seen speaking slugs, snakes and monkeys? Vulcans spoke, though their attitude was very annoying since they were filled with arrogance. They reminded him of a younger Sasuke, and Kiba. The beast didn't respond, it merely growled before charging away from him. Naruto held out his right hand and blue magic seal appeared around the beast's waist. The seal kept the beast in place and from moving any further. It was a simple binding seal that Naruto had applied. It was obvious that the beast was going to make way from him after punching him. Now that was something he couldn't accept even though he wasn't looking for trouble. "That is just being rude," Naruto said, looking offended as he walked towards the beast. "You don't just suddenly attack someone and then hit the ground like that, not without even saying a word." There was still no response as the beast struggled to break free from his seal. Naruto was now wondering if the beast could even understand him. It certainly didn't look like it was listening to him. Naruto snapped his attention behind. Eyes narrowed, he could feel another presence and it felt somewhat sinister. The demonic feeling made all the warmth in his eyes a memory and all his senses working at full power. He wasn't used to such a feeling in this world, but he did know that there were types of magic who could make such a feeling, not necessarily making one evil. The beast finally broke free from its bind, and snapped at Naruto. Its right punch cleaved through the air as it sped towards Naruto with tremendous speed and power. The blonde still had his attention focused on the other presence. Even so, when he was not even looking, his right hand was raised high, palm open, and the large punch collided with it. Naruto didn't move, not even an inch, much to the evident surprise and shock of the beast. The ground beneath him wasn't so lucky though, it shattered under the tremendous force of the punch. Another blue magic seal formed between Naruto's palm and the punch of the beast. A shot of light blue lightning traveled through the beast in a heap of static. The beast let out a shrill of pain as the lightning consumed its hard body from the inside. The beast jumped away from Naruto to cut the flow of the electricity into its body. A smoke like that coming from burned meat started to seep out of the beast, signifying just how much pain Naruto had made it suffer. He hadn't used a simple spell, and it would have probably left a normal human with burn marks. Considering that he didn't have full control of his magic, anything was to be expected from his spells. Naruto looked away from the new presence and looked at the beast. Your skin is very tough, I doubt I can even put a mark on you with just a normal spell. Against someone else, physical attacks also won't do any good. The beast didn't respond, it again charged at him. But this time, it appeared to be furious over his last spell. It was also moving a lot faster than before. Still, Naruto didn't flash away from his position. He raised his right hand and a blue round magic seal appeared before shooting a beam of blue energy straight at the beast. The beam hit the beast straight on the chest, but it made no difference as it continued to move on towards him. Naruto was forced to duck under a right swing that would have surely disconnected his head from his shoulder if it had hit him straight on. The beast tried to squash him under its right foot after missing, but Naruto flashed a few feet away from it. The large foot crushed the ground mercilessly. Standing still from a few distance away, Naruto clasped his hands together. Lightning ecstasy, he muttered before around 11 magical seals surrounded the target. All seals sparkled blue lightning before they all shot electric currencies at the surrounded beast. It was no different than saying that beast was thrown into a pit of intense flames. The result was a loud shrill that tore through the forest before the beast finally stopped and collapsed, but not before changing into a human. Naruto cancelled his spell, but even when the spell was cancelled, some electric current continued to sparkle around the fallen human. A white-haired young lady then landed on the ground a few feet away before rushing over to the fallen human. I wouldn't touch him if I were you, Naruto stated calmly. I need to check for his pulse, came a quick response from the white-haired. Electricity is still flowing within his body, if you touch him, it will shock you, Naruto said. Besides, if you really thought I was going to kill him, you would have stopped me while my spell was still active. The white-haired turned to face the blonde before asking, who are you? Take over magic, I see, Naruto said. I presume he had lost control after a full-body takeover and you'd been chasing after him. The blonde didn't wait for the white-haired to respond, he went on. To answer your question, Mage-chan, I am Naruto. The blonde smiled once more before turning around to leave. Wait. Naruto didn't say anything, he seemingly vanished into the trees. A second later he returned. I thought I sensed something, he muttered as he walked towards the white-haired mage. You're the one who felt demonic. It was by no means a question, it was a clear statement. The girl looked him silently as though she was trying to figure something out. She didn't say a word until Naruto walked past her and kneeled down on the side of the former beast he had electrocuted. What are you doing? Her voice was somewhat stern. Dispelling all the static in him so that he can wake up and you can go. I imagine that it would be a task for you to carry such a big fella all the way home, Naruto responded before placing his index finger on his forehead. Lightning sparkled around his finger as it gathered there. He then pointed his finger to the side, releasing all the lightning he had absorbed. Thank you, the female stranger said, now standing just beside him. Naruto smiled at her as he stood up. Don't mention it, he said. He should be awake in a few minutes. I doubt he will be able to walk though. In any case, drink this and attach this to his forehead when he wakes up, it will restore his magic. Naruto produced a small bottle of water and handed a small piece of paper to the girl. What is this? She asked, looking at the bottle curiously. It is just plain water, Naruto responded with a smile. There are a number of mages coming from the direction which you came, would they be friends or hostiles? Friends. Excellent, he seemed relieved. Take care, Mage-chan. I will take my leave now, he bowed a little before disappearing with the winds that picked when he bowed. This is something you don't see every day, the woman thought, a complete stranger helping her out then disappear without demanding anything else. Well, she could say that he was forced to attack because the beast had attacked him out of nowhere. She did wonder who he really was and what he was doing in a large forest like this all by himself. He didn't seem bad, but he was surely strong. Naruto. Naruto appeared a considerable distance away from the forest. He had sped through the forest in great speeds for about 2 hours. That meant that he covered a lot of distance between him and the white-haired stranger. They couldn't track him down now since they couldn't catch him, and he left no trace of his presence at the forest. He was currently walking slowly in the outskirts of the river village, walking towards the greenly forest where his target was located. It took him 4 days to finally locate these people. Aika wasn't so much forthcoming about their locations, so he only had clues to work. But with the help of his clones, the time and distance didn't matter much. All he had to do was disguise and have them search for the group he needed. 4 days gone, and all sources pointed at this forest. Not many people had the joy of coming into such a forest. But Naruto wasn't just many people, he was a man on a mission. He had walked through scary and frightening territories in the quest for knowledge, and nothing much really scared him. Well, he was the demon god after all. What could scare the man who had no equal in the elemental nations? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. With 4 days gone, he had more days to spend at the library while looking through many things that would interest him. A week was a long time for one like him who had clones to divide tasks. He could turn a week-long reading into a year-long reading with a few clones. Ah, he so loved his clones. Naruto entered the forest and continued walking silently. His steps finally came to a halt when he saw a large building, about 4 stories high, standing tall in front of him. This must be the place, he thought. There was no sign of Dark Sith anywhere, but that didn't deter him. If his intel led him to this place, then this was the right place for him to visit. The blonde sighed, this was surely going to be troublesome. Being diplomatic surely didn't work that well. When these kinds of people see that you're willing to bleed, they will keep cutting you until your body can't produce any blood. He had seen such people, and he knew that giving the devil a hug was another way of telling it to stab you on the back while you were lost in its cold comfort. Still, for his conscience and to avoid doing what he would deem to be wrong, he still had to try. It wasn't his policy to dismiss people on the first sight of seeing their evil, he had to give a chance. Everyone deserved at least that much at least. He held a single hand sign and a large bag appeared in a puff of smoke on his right side. Naruto picked up the bag before walking towards the entrance of the large building. He didn't even know when he went through the double doors. Just when he was about to open them, they suddenly opened like there was some kind of motion sensor that sensed his movements and the mechanism supporting the sensors pushed the doors to open. Naruto showed no fear though, he just went through the doors with the black bag firmly on his right hand. Once he entered the building, he was greeted by a large hall. It was noisy, there were some noise inside the hall and the stench of alcohol reeked throughout the walls of the hall. Tables and chairs were filled with men sharing bitter laughs, and tales that had no proof of existence, lies. There was not a single woman in the hall, it was all men. Naruto's presence was quickly noted with an eerie silence that settled in the hall as soon as he dropped the heavy bag of gold the wooden floor. This is what they call Dark Sith. It wasn't a question, but someone interpreted it like it was. Who wants to know? The man who questioned was standing behind the counter. He watched Naruto carefully. The intruder had wild blonde hair that framed down the sides of his face. A few bangs covered most of his forehead, reaching just above his clear blue eyes. His attire consisted of a tight long-sleeved crimson shirt, a black short-sleeved coat. It was long reaching just above his ankles. The coat was tattered at the edges like an old cloth, and it was also decorated with a red flame pattern. He wore slightly skinny black pants, black shinobi boots. Me, Naruto responded calmly. Can I speak to the boss if he is? Naruto trailed off when his eyes caught the presence of a man he had seen before. His expression became stern. You. The man in question growled, bastard. That was what he was, to him anyway, and he would give anything that see Naruto killed, anything he can afford, that is. He'd never been so disgraced and humiliated in his life before he came around, and even today, he would never admit to anyone what he did in order to secure his survival. You know this idiot. All eyes looked at the man as he nodded. He is the one that busted up my branch, the man simply said before staring down at Naruto. This revelation did nothing but make the other men turn their attention on the blonde. Their eyes stared at him with cruel intentions. No doubt if they were connected with the guild he had destroyed, they would seek revenge. Even some evil people did care about their comrades and properties. However, what was more important to such people was the disrespect Naruto showed when he destroyed one of their branches. If he had destroyed one of their houses, then they would seek to destroy his own house and screw his life over just to get even. I see you return to this kind of life even after I spared your life, Naruto stated. He was only staring at the man he had sparred. This man had practically begged for his life. He had literally cried while singing some "Sorry, I won't do it again" songs and swore he would change his ways if he allowed him to live. Being a good person as he was, he permitted it. It was because the man had cried, looking pathetic. He was not cold-hearted enough to put that way and destroy everything on his path. This man had only been involved in demanding payment to the village. He'd stayed in for a couple of days, for protection. They had stationed their guild outside the village and protected it against outsiders, and in return, they made the villagers suffer. The others he'd punished were doing despicable things that couldn't be forgiven. But here was now, looking at the same man. It wasn't even a coincidence that this man was somehow involved with the people that were making Ika bleed. If he hadn't met Ika, no, if he hadn't moved to the capital, then he wouldn't have seen this man. He wouldn't even have been forced to do something like this because he wouldn't have met Ika. But he was led to this place, and facing a man he'd sparred for doing evil. Was this some plot by some screwed up god to prove him wrong? Was this to prove to him that evil was evil? Not at all, a voice responded within Naruto's head. Naruto was more accustomed to hearing voices inside his head that he didn't fail to realize it. It was definitely coming from his head, and it was unfamiliar. Who are you in my head? You're not Kurama. Are you Kami? Not at all, the voice sounded amused by the question of Kami. I myself question if beings as gods truly to exist. Who are you then? You won't listen to anything I say before I tell you what you want to know. Naruto could swear he saw a head shaking in resignation. I am not God. In your world you have legends such as the Jubi and the Sage of Six Paths. In this world, I am like the Sage of Six Paths. Though unlike him or Zirf, I am an unknown factor. I never existence to the people of this world. I am just an ancient spirit lost in time. Naruto's eyes narrowed and his whole posture became slightly tense. This voice wasn't of God, but it knew about him. This wasn't something that he had told anyone, neither Ika nor Hisui. He didn't even dream about it. When it came to such a topic, it never left his mouth. What do you want? It's been almost a year and a half since you died and came to this world. I have been trying to get in contact with you, but the circumstances were never right, especially when you didn't think about bad people. I am what brought you to this world, though I merely took advantage of the situation caused by an overflow of power between your soul, Kurama and the Geto Mazo, which you had buried deep inside of your soul and thought nothing of it after that. What do you want? Naruto repeated. Got to Tenro Island, you will find Zirf. There, I will leave the coordinates of the island with you. After you have done so, come and have a chat with me at the ancient ruins. I would advise that you don't take much time. I don't have too long before my existence disappears. To bring you into this world, I sacrificed my own existence. Zirf is dead, Naruto said. The Dark Mage is said to have lived about 400 years ago, and he shouldn't be alive. Well, unless he was immortal. Immortality wasn't something he would consider to be a shock when he dealt with an immortal beast every day during the glorious days. But if Zirf has been alive all along, why doesn't anyone know of it? There was no response to his statement. The voice had disappeared from his head. He had really died in the elemental nations. That wasn't a shock though. He had known that he was going to die and he had died. There was some truth in Kurama's last words after all. The Geto Mazo wasn't supposed to be a factor since he'd buried it before his last battle. He wasn't its Jinchuriki, he had just buried it inside of him. Of course he had access to its power. But all calculations show that it was supposed to perish along with his soul, unlike Kurama. Then what could have happened? To keep the balance of things, in order to revive someone, you had to sacrifice your own life. There was such a technique in the shinobi world, but it was forbidden. Though, you didn't have to make a sacrifice with the Rinnegan. It took chakra and weaving hand signs to bring the dead to life. Someone else had sacrificed for him to be here. For what purpose, he wondered. He had a hard time believing that Zirf was alive. But he knew himself too well to know that he didn't hallucinate and that voice had actually spoken to him. A punch straight on the gut smashed Naruto out of his thoughts. The blonde had become so lost in his thoughts that he actually forgot about his surroundings. The punch was a nice touch to bring him out of his thoughts. Idiot, we talkin' to you, the man who'd punched him snarled, glaring at him. Naruto smiled, making the man scowl. Sorry, I was lost in thought, the blonde said a little apologetically. Can I speak to the boss of this place? I am the boss. The man who responded was standing in front of him. He was wearing a dark hooded coat, black leather boots. The black shirt he wore revealed his toned chest. No doubt the man trained hard, physically, and he was of a good build. He stood just slightly taller than Naruto. Naruto took out a picture of Aika. I brought gold to settle her debt, the blonde said. He unzipped the bag to show the stones of gold, before facing the boss again. I'm sure there isn't a problem with that. At the sight of the stones, the man's look became darker. A twisted smile spread across his face as he took the picture of Aika. Ah, I know this girl, she is one of our clients. His eyes went at the gold. Are those stones real? Naruto nodded, and took one out before handing over to the man. The boss held it for a few moments while the silent hall watched. The man smiled before snapping his fingers. All +30 members were on their feet, ready to pounce on Naruto. While this looks good, I'm afraid it can't overhaul her debts, the boss said. You'll have to bring 2 more of those bags, and then we can talk about settling the issue of overdue interest charges. Predictable. This was expected, Naruto sighed before smiling sadly. I don't know why I bother with you people. He had known it would most likely end like this, and yet he tried speaking to them anyway. He wasn't going to try any negotiations, they wouldn't yield any result. The fact that a man who had begged to be sparred was still living this kind of life was reason enough for him. Naruto shook his head. In a blur, the boss was sent sailing towards his men after a fast right punch from Naruto. The punch had hit him straight on his face and hard enough to make him lose his hold on the gold stone he held. Naruto caught the stone and placed it back on the bed before he made it disappear. Noise broke out when Naruto punched the boss and sent him flying. Once the boss recovered, he held his bleeding mouth before ordering his men to get the blonde. Naruto didn't listen to the curses that were sent flying towards him. Keep these fools from moving, gravity, he said while making fast movements with his index finger, which was glowing light blue energy. A large magical circle appeared above the group of evildoers, and another on the wooden floor. All the men fell down the floor on their knees as gravity pulled them down. Naruto turned around to leave. Get back here, bastard. The blonde ignored it and walked out of the building before stopping on a good distance. He looked at the clear skies, sadly, and closed his eyes. He formed his resolve and clasped his hands together, while in deep concentration. Lightning God Justice, he said, keeping his hands clasped together. 3 large magical circles appeared above the large building, covering it entirely in width. The seals hovered like a pregnant cloud for a few moments before the third seal, which was above the other 2, began to emit lightning. In a second, a wave of pure lightning crushed down towards the building. Naruto blinked, and when his vision became clear, the building was no more, its existence had been removed. There was nothing but a larger crater from where the building once stood. Naruto heaved another sigh. My body is still not used to using this kind of magic. I guess I shouldn't have neglected my training. He could feel some strains on his body, despite the spell not being the most powerful of its kind. Training was needed to condition his body. But now was not the time for that, he had more matters to deal with. It was either he sent a clone to the library to do some reading while he traveled towards Tenro Island, or just forget about the library. As the voice said, the coordinates were left inside his head. Tenro Island. Naruto found out that getting into the island wasn't easy since he had to travel through sea first before breaking the barrier that concealed the island's visibility. Despite all his objections in coming into this place because he couldn't understand many things and the many questions that raised in his mind, he had forced himself to travel into this island and it had taken him much more time than he had anticipated. He would be returning to Ica at a later date than first thought. As soon as Naruto landed on the island, he got the feeling that he wasn't wanted by something or someone. He could feel it inside him that something was watching him. Something was sending him a glare that told him to beat it because he was trespassing. But he'd been told to come here, and no matter what, he wouldn't leave without searching the entire land. Even though he continued to feel that hostile feeling, he wouldn't leave just yet. This was important to him, to his existence. Zirf was a main subject in most of the books he has read. Despite being a black mage, the man was a genius at work when it came to magic. If he had been a good person, he would have surely be the sage of 6 paths of this world. Many evil people revered his name and some worshipped him. Well, he was the most powerful black mage to have ever lived. According to what Hisui told him, the mage is the one to have turned Aknalaja, the dragon of Apocalypse, into a dragon. Aknalaja was another feared name. Naruto didn't think anyone in this time has seen the black dragon. But he didn't doubt that the dragon does indeed exist. Zirf led the word into chaos, nearly destroying it all. Then this man must have all the answers about the humans of this world. Still, he was an evil man. Could he stand that? This man was hailed as the most evil mage. What could stop him from trying to kill him once he does find him, if he is even on this island? What was he even doing here? If his reputation is true as it is written, then he should be causing havoc in this world rather than staying secluded. There were many questions. Perhaps this is why he even came here, to get the answers should the black mage be really alive, and if he's willing to share his story. Well, they could boast about past glories. Zirf didn't lack anything to boast about during his days, and he plenty of stories to tell about his days as the demon god. Naruto finally found a human, after hours of searching. The human was just a young man. He didn't see any picture of the black maid, Zirf, to identify him. Even when looking at the expression on the youth, he couldn't say this was Zirf. But something in him yelled that this was the notorious black mage. Just to be sure, Naruto asked, "Might you be, Zirf?" He asked, all while smiling at the youth. A smile defined his identity. He couldn't forget one since it was part of him. The youth looked at him calmly. He was learning against a tree trunk, sitting down. He then stood up before responding. What are you? The expression of the youth had changed drastically from that of a somewhat depressed youth to a somewhat serious person. Naruto's brow furrowed at the question. It shouldn't have been phrased like that. Wouldn't it be better if you'd phrased, who are you? The smile on his face never escaped. He wasn't insulted by those words, he knew who and what he was to be concerned with what people said about him. Zirf shook his head. I didn't make a mistake, he said. What are you? The moment you touched this island I felt that something was coming towards me, and when you reached me, I sensed something that made me regain control over my magic. You're Zirf then, Naruto said. He wasn't expecting the dark mage to be like this. Physically, he looked like a mere youth. But that could be because of his immortality, meaning that he stopped aging. He had expected to something else, well, something not this. The questions in him flooded like floods caused an outbreak of sea waves. It was no doubt him, the man he had so learned much about. The man he had been tasked to seeing. Nothing much was said, but he was told that he should come to this island and he would see Zirf. Now he has, what to do? Does he question the mage or just hit the road? The man looked serious enough by his presence and he said some interesting statements. From what he saw before this and what he was seeing now, Naruto could say that not everything about this man was covered in books. There was a lot to this black mage than what people painted about him. It made Naruto curious, enough to drive the desire to sit down with the man to have a chat with him. To answer your question, I am what I am, and I am who I am. By name I am Naruto Uzumaki, Naruto added. Zirf stared at him silently before walking towards him. He stopped just inches away from him and two of his fingers were placed on Naruto's forehead. However, upon contact, a black mist surrounded Zirf while a white one surrounded Naruto before both exploded, separating the two. No harm was done. Both Zirf and Naruto were still on their feet, just a bit away from each other. Your real magic nullifies some elements of my magic, while the same can be said for my magic. I didn't think that someone that strong would exist in this age. You don't really feel human, what are you really? Naruto sighed before sitting down on the blades of grass around them. It appeared like he was going to have a civil conversation with the dark mage and no one would be firing spells at him. The black mage before him didn't seem to be all evil as he read, but he couldn't mistake that feeling of raw dark power he felt when their magic collided. This man was as strong as the books said he was. Naruto looked at the mage calmly, losing his smile. I am human, but I have been hailed as a demon, due to power and actions. Zirf returned to sitting beside the tree trunk while leaning against it. A warm breeze passed by, picking up a few fallen leaves. A few moments passed and everything settled down. The black mage was really surprised that such a thing could stand right in front of him. He couldn't say that this thing was a human. It may be dressed in human flesh, speak like a human, walk like a human, and smile like a human, but his senses told him this thing wasn't a human. He couldn't say it was a demon either. He hadn't met anyone or anything like it in all his long and miserable life. He had been sitting here, waiting for Natsu to grow and become strong enough to kill him. With everything that has happened, only Natsu could achieve such a feat. That is what he believed anyway. But looking at this pseudo-human, he couldn't say this thing couldn't match him. However, as it was now, it couldn't defeat him. But it could, if given full control of all that overwhelming demonic power he was sensing. Looking at its eyes, Zirf could say that they were somewhat alike. They had seen too much, they had seen many humans die. The interesting thing was that the mere presence of this thing was enough to force him out. It was like they were opposites, with a somewhat similar, yet different past. It did say it was called a demon due to power and actions. But one thing he was certain of was that it didn't happen in this world, otherwise, he would have known about it. This led him to one conclusion. You're not from this world, are you? The feeling that something was watching him didn't leave him. Zirf didn't seem to acknowledge or Either he couldn't see it. We're not alone in this island, are we? The fact that Naruto could feel her presence only confirmed some things Zerf thought of this person in front of him. Even he couldn't see her, but he could feel her presence, just as Naruto could. No, there is also someone else. Naruto nodded, and then appeared thoughtful for a few seconds before he shrugged. You're right. I am not of this world. I am from another universe. I don't really know much about how I came here, but it's been about 17 or 16 months since I've been here. An unknown factor into this age, could this be set to change the fate of the human world? Naruto was a new player that he did not count on to exist in this age, no one did. Everything was calculated before, and his calculations missed this person. A simple unknown factor could change many things, especially when it could directly interfere with things. But of course he had no plans to do anything, he just wanted to die. But if it couldn't be helped, then he would side with the annihilation of all humans. This person couldn't help him with understanding how he was able to come into this age, since he has stated that he doesn't know much about how he came here. Zerf wasn't going to waste time asking, since he knew he wasn't going to get sufficient answers. He had one more question in this matter, a question that could explain a lot of things if the answer is good enough. Why did they call you a demon in your world? Your core power feels demonic, yet at the same time emits light. This was the Dark Mage, and it wouldn't kill him to speak to such a man. He had spoken to Hagoromo in his age, and that wasn't a shock. Speaking to a notorious legend of this world couldn't feel like a dream to him. My world was a shinobi world, a flawed world full of evil, greedy humans who sought peace during day but wore demonic masks during night to search for conflicts and indulge in them. This world had a violent history. Nations fought against each other over little things. Wars that served no purpose were fought, baptizing the world with blood and hatred. The results of a war are pain, suffering and hatred. There is no real winner in a war, everyone loses something, and in turn, men continue to breed hatred and nurse it like a loved infant. Hatred circulates with each battle, never ending. Humans became despicable creatures who contradicted themselves. In my world, children were sent to war to fight for their village. From a young, we were taught to kill in the pretense that we were being taught to protect our villages. My own ancestral home was annihilated simply because they were growing powerful to challenge the big dogs. The attack left only a few survivors from my clan and the village in ruins. What infuriated me the most was that this village was perhaps the most peaceful village in the shinobi world. My people didn't involve themselves in wars, they chose to remain in peace. But I held no grudge over the culprits. I was born in a village called Konoha, which was the strongest village in my world. During the night I was born, an immortal beast attacked the village. In this world, you could say a dragon attacked the village, killing many people. This wasn't just a normal beast, it was the strongest beast of all beasts that existed. My father, a leader of the Konoha, sacrificed himself to protect the village by sealing it inside of me. Unfortunately, my mother also died that night. As a result, I was left to fend for myself, with no one to call family. The ignorant fools my father died protecting hated my existence simply because the thing that killed their loved ones was inside of me. No, they didn't see it like that. I was the thing that made them suffer, a demon, the Kyuubi brat. Naruto went on to tell the rest of the story. Zerf kept silence for a few moments while he absorbed everything. I still maintain my point. I can't call you a human. However, I will admit that you're much more human than I am, he said. Naruto shook his head. I wouldn't say I am better than you, he said. I understand some parts of your story, why don't you share with me why you're in this island? I am an unknown factor after all, and I did tell you my story, Naruto finished with a smile. It can't be helped, Zerf said. I watched so many humans die, and I have come to see the value of human life, and I want to die to pay for all I have done. But if the situation comes, I will be forced to awaken and take an active role in this age. I don't need to explain to you why I find humans despicable. Nevertheless, I do wish to die before I do anything. In response, Naruto chuckled a bit bitterly. You're much more human than I am, he said. You regret your actions and wish to pay for them. But I killed so many bad people, and many innocent people with these hands of mine. Many innocent learned to hate, fight to kill because of me. Yet I don't regret it. I killed innocent people, and atonement was to die. Though I died, I am still alive. I have fooled myself into living under the illusion of a second chance because I saved the shinobi world. I smile every day, while some have scars in their hearts because of me. Zirf wasn't going to offer any words of comfort, but he did respond. The difference between you and me is that you didn't do what you did because you were evil. You did what you did because you cared for your world and was willing to sacrifice some people to save it. Your actions were to unite people. He still did think that Naruto understood this better than he did. If not, he wouldn't smile. Naruto shook his head, not to reject Zeref's words, but to clear his mind. Every world has its own past and darkness, and as long as there are people trying to connect the past and the present, the combination will be a future of doom. I do wish I do not live to see that tomorrow, this was Zeref's words. But I sense that it is going to come anyway, and I will be forced to take action. An action that won't be good for humanity, Naruto said as he stood up. It was truly an honor, but I do hope I never see you again, not in a time when doom is at the door. I am not an ally of anyone, nor an enemy of anyone, but if Acknowledge is summoned, we will see each other again, Zirf said before closing his eyes. Naruto didn't respond. He walked away, leaving the black mage alone. Zirf opened his eyes. This time, he looked sad. Will this world ever allow me to atone for my sins? He asked in a somewhat depressed tone. Naruto. There are so many days that Naruto has found himself staring at the royal castle for no particular reason. The royal family controlled Fury. It was the government that controlled this country. Nations such as this in his world were often used to serve the needs of the king instead of the people. But this kingdom was a bit different. Naruto didn't see the royal family in a bad light. While he has not met the king, he has met its princess, Hisui. She was a light, the good thing, and if someone like her was able to live in this kingdom, then other people couldn't be so bad. For this belief, Naruto continued to just watch the royal castle. He had no interest in involving himself with its activities. Even when he had done a job to improve the royal guard's weaponry, he wished to be no part in any of the activities they did. He did wonder though, what would happen if things between the royal family and the Magic Council went south. The Magic Council didn't just end in Fury, it controlled guilds and mages everywhere within Earthland. Obvious it held more power when it came to magic than the royal family. But what if the royal family was to seek that power? What would happen? They surely had the jewels to pay anyone to fight for their side. That is not to say the Magic Council was by any means without any money. But it would be interesting to see what would happen if something was to break out between the Magic Council and the royal family. If Kami was going to be forced to take part in the events of this world, he would always side with the royal family, to be more precise, Hisui. No matter what happened, even if the Magic Council sought after her for doing illegal experiments in dark magic, he would always side with her. She was the first friend he made in this world, and he would side her as long as she remains as Hisui. It's about time I went home, Naruto thought mildly before turning his eyes from the royal castle. He was standing above the rooftop of the public library. He had already sent a word to Hisui to see him just outside of the capital. He had to see Aika now. He still had ancient ruins to visit, and he didn't have to waste any more time. It would still be difficult to see Hisui though. He had met the Black Wizard, a mage. Hisui invested her time and efforts, and he wasn't going to tell her about it. No one was going to know from his mouth that Zirf was actually alive. He wouldn't say anything, not even when the Magic Council threatened to shoot him with their biggest weapon. Sighing, Naruto left the roof and took the busy streets towards his small apartment. Once he reached the place, he found it exactly as it had been when he left it. Aika didn't change a single thing. It pleased him though. He hadn't thought that she would actually leave it as it was, even though he'd told her so. Women tended to do whatever they pleased. His experience with Mei has taught him many things, and one of which was that he never had the final say in everything. Naruto was forcefully pushed back to the door when Aika threw herself at him, crushing him in a tight hug. A smile formed on his lips. Even when he was in Konoha, no one welcomed him home like this. No one showed affection like this, and those were people he'd saved many times. The only person who showed him affection of this level was Mei Terumi. Unconsciously, his hands moved behind the woman, embracing her. He had been gone for close to 3 weeks, and during that time, there was no contact between her. He too missed her. I missed you, Naruto, Aika said, never letting him go. I thought you may have just left me with all your money and ran away from me. Why would you think that, Aika-chan? Do you have such a low opinion of me? Aika shook her head slightly, a response to his second question. You said you wouldn't take more than 2 weeks, and 2 weeks went by without a word from you. I was worried, thinking that those people might have gotten to you since they knew that you're helping me. Did they come while I was away? That would be a problem since he thought he'd eliminated all the fools. This would only mean that they were watching her from afar, and saw it when she was glowing with money. He really did slip while at this place to actually allow something like that to happen. Aika nodded. 2 of them came, she said, a bit down. I'm really sorry, Naruto. She broke the hug and settled on staring at his eyes, giving him a pitiful look. Sometimes I really think women are manipulative, Naruto thought, seeing that look on her face. When such a look came, defenses were lowered and he would allow her to enter. Still, this was Aika. He brought her close to his chest and held her comfortably. It's all right, Aika-chan, he said. She probably didn't even get to pay for their new place. He had more cleaning duty to do. This was what he got for playing ignorant to the evil of this world. This was what he got in return for leaving her alone without protection. Come on, Naruto said as he led Aika to the couch. He sat her down before sitting beside her. Aside from the unwanted, how were things with you? Did you get to have some fun? Focusing on the good, a good plan. Everything else went smoothly. I got a job at a bank. She exclaimed happily. Naruto smiled proudly at her. You did well, Aika-chan. I might even take you out on a date someday, or even a resort. Really? She wasn't thrilled about a date, no, going to a resort. Money has been so dry that she wasn't even able to afford for a day at a spa. Naruto didn't seem to struggle with jewels, he could work something out and she could enjoy herself if he was actually serious. Naruto nodded. Naruto Uzumaki promises that one day, he will take you out for a week-long vacation at any place of your choice. I will even rob a train transporting gold if I can't afford the vacation. He gave her a thumbs up and a smile. I will hold on to your promise, Naruto, Aika said. Naruto's happy smile was replaced by a blank smile. He moved closer to Aika, holding up her chin, while his eyes stared right at hers. You said you missed me. Just how much do you miss me, Aika-chan? He asked while moving for a kiss. Aika stopped him by placing her index finger on his lips. Not that much, darling, she said with a wink. But keep trying, maybe one day you'll be lucky. Aha, and I was looking forward to it, Naruto sighed, before flashing a grin. I heard a crazy rumor when I was returning. I'm telling you, it is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Wanna know? 3 hours later, a distance away from the royal castle, there were several hills mounted up together in numbers. Naruto was standing tall on one of them. Hisui noted that he looked exactly like a statue since he'd been standing, unmoving for some time now. Her guards were a few feet away since she wasn't allowed to leave with just her personal guard. But she told them to wait up so she could talk to Naruto alone. His request to meet here sounded personal, and she was going to give him that much. He deserved at least that much for all the help he gave her. Naruto turned around to face Hisui with a somewhat sad look on his face. Your trust in me will always be rewarded, princess. So long as you live, this trust you've shown in me will always be repaid. Just coming here to meet him meant more to what she really thought of him. If she had thought he was after something, she wouldn't have come here. But she risked everything and came here to meet him, away from the comfort of the royal castle. He could kill her and get away without being caught in this kind of place. Hisui knows it, and yet she came, simply because she trusted him. Such trust wasn't just found everywhere. Naruto thought only a handful of people could show this much trust to a total stranger whose past was just one big mystery. She trusted him more than anyone, yet she wasn't the person he showered with affection the most. You haven't done anything to make you mistrust you, Naruto, Hisui said with a smile. She did wonder why the sad smile, but since he called her here, she figured he would eventually explain. I sold my services to the royal family for gold, then disappear for about 3 weeks. When I return, I request a meeting with you in a secluded place. Wouldn't you find that suspicious? Hisui didn't deny it. She nodded. It is suspicious, but I'm sure you had your own reasons for doing what you did. Unless there is proof to say you're not what you sold yourself to be, I will continue to believe what you say to me. That really means a lot to me, princess, Naruto said. He jumped down to stand level ground with her while standing close to her. I am going away for some time. Silence settled for a few moments before Hisui spoke. You called me here to say goodbye, she said. Foreign emotions swelled inside of her. The realization didn't make her happy. It saddened her. Despite saying he was only going away for some time, Hisui got the feeling that it was probably going to be a long time, and it somewhat scared her. She didn't want to think of how it would be like without him. She had been practically jumping in joy when she found out he returned, but now this. Naruto nodded. I will return, there is just something that I must do, he said. He then took out a letter and handed it to her. Please give this to Aika-chan. I couldn't say goodbye to her. Hisui took the letter. Aika-chan. He was mentioning her for the second time now. She didn't think that he would be cowardly enough to be afraid of saying goodbye, but she wasn't going to judge. Why did you call me out here, Naruto? If this was all he wanted, he could have spoken to her back at the castle or at the library. There had to be a reason he brought her here, and she expected him to at least honor her with an answer. Coming here was a gamble on her part, but it did pay off. I wanted to assure myself if I could really count on you. I wanted you to know that you can always trust me, Naruto said quietly. Trusting people is something I struggle against, but I am thankful that I trusted a person like you. Now that I know how much you trust me, I can say these to you. Whenever you call for me, I will come for you, and I will never betray you. Naruto swears in the name of Kushina Uzumaki. Hisui was quiet for a few moments. This is actually hard, she chuckled. I am also thankful that my trust in you didn't end up in pain, and I truly hope that you never forget me. You will always be in my mind, princess, Naruto said. I have begun work on a book I have titled Time. It will help you with time travel once I have completed it. There are still many elements that I must add on and research. But once I have completed it, I will return to give it to you. I hope that is soon. So do I, princess, Naruto said. Before turning around to leave, I'll see you until then. Hisui caught his right hand with both her hands, forcing him to face her. She smiled as she tried, failing miserably to mask her emotions. Will you say my name? I've always been the princess to you. Hisui. I guess now we have broken through the barriers that hindered some things, Naruto said as he wrapped his hands around the princess. Stand tall, dear. Do not be afraid to explore new worlds. There is no mountain that can't be climbed. Do not be afraid, do not waver, and if you feel like you're falling, call for me, and I will give you my hand. Naruto then kissed her on her forehead before continuing. Stay true to your convictions, Hisui, the path to destiny isn't all merry, but know that you're not alone, and never allow anyone to sway you from your beliefs. Stay as Hisui. If you dare change, I will break into the royal castle and burn down all your work, that I promise you. Nothing will change me, Naruto. Naruto smiled once more before pushing her away from him. I hope so, he said. Yane, Hisui-chan. He disappeared after those words left his lips. It was time for a god to go on another long journey. Hisui stared at the spot he'd been standing for a few moments. It suddenly felt like she had been thinking it was a dream, and now the reality had been brought before her. She felt sad, the simple reason being that Naruto was gone. And she feared he was going to be doing heavy things. She could sense it in her gut that she would be hearing more about him before he does return. Naruto looked at the large pyramid that stood in the middle of the ancient ruins. It wasn't exactly visible to the eyes, but nothing was really hidden before the eyes of Naruto Uzumaki. He figured that no one really had ventured into the pyramid since it wasn't visible to the eye, and it wasn't exactly tangible for one to touch it if you couldn't see it. Sighing once more as he gathered the energy reserves stored within his muscles, Naruto closed his eyes. He was preparing himself for what was coming, what he was going to hear from this being that brought him from the elemental nations. His life wasn't his anymore. He had died, and this being that called him here had sacrificed his life to being him here. As far as it concerned him, Naruto knew that he had died, and this could only explain why he was alive and all parts of his body present. If someone had given their life for him to live, he could at least hear what they had to say. As if it was on automatic, the walls shifted to create a passage for him to enter. The passage he walked through was deathly quiet. Candles were lit on the walls, giving the passage a dim light. Some sort of thick mist flowed on the surface where his feet touched. He couldn't see where he was landing, but he still walked without fear or doubt. His eyes were only focused on the end of the passage. Once he made it out of the end of the passage, he reached the center of the pyramid. It was rather clear as day. The center was some sort of a hall, the entrance being at the one he used. All four sides were empty, but there was something like a tomb in the middle and a man sitting on top of it, legs crossed. He was wearing a white gown, exactly like Hagoromo's, and had small black eyes, as well as shoulder-length black hair. Naruto didn't reach the man, but stopped at a safe distance. You surely did take your time in coming here, the stranger said calmly. I could have ceased to exist if you had taken much longer. The voice was the same as the one that had spoken to him in the river village. It was a bit light though, but the same voice nonetheless. In response, Naruto shrugged. I don't think you would have allowed yourself to cease to exist before you spoke to me if you really wanted to tell me something important. That may be true, but when your time is up, it is up, the man said. I am not surprised someone like you would say something like that though. You are the same person who promised Mei-san that you would return from the dead if your plan doesn't work. He sounded a bit amused. Sometimes he truly went overboard when making promises, but then again, the power between life and death was inside his hands. He existed in the physical plane and the spiritual plane. Why wouldn't he believe he could return from the dead? On top of that, he did the impossible, even some things he considered to be godly. How couldn't he believe that the impossible would happen if he did many of such things? Before he could respond, it was only then did he realize that the man in front of him was a ghost. He could see through him. He didn't say his findings out loud. He settled for responding to the remark about his promise. I gave up too much for things to turn out in a way I did not think. If my spirit is watching, then it surely wouldn't rest in peace until its body is revived. Of course, since I am here, that can't happen. Being here meant that even if he couldn't remain in a plane where he could observe the elemental nations. But if he existed somewhere, he wouldn't be here. Being here meant that his soul was in this world. Everything of his existence had been removed in order to be brought here. Perhaps he had been a little too naive to think that he would be able to move between the dead and living as he so wishes. Hagoromo couldn't do that, he couldn't even show himself to everyone, and he couldn't interfere with things directly. The fact was simple. He was a dead man and so was he. Even if he had turned into the state of Hagoromo, he could only influence little. You dream too much. Simply because you existed between life and dead didn't mean that you could return from the dead any time you chose. Once you died, you lost that power. But you studied enough to know it. Could it be that you only choose to believe otherwise just so you can assure yourself that things are well in the elemental nations because you aren't tossing and turning? Naruto appeared thoughtful for a moment, but he shrugged in the end. Maybe, he said. The man smiled. Let us move on to why we called you here, shall we? He paused to see Naruto's reaction, and continued when he got what he wanted. Your fist question is what happened during the last battle. I will tell you this bluntly. It is as Kurama told you. In the end, they burned your body to ashes. Not so surprisingly after all I did, Naruto said. He didn't seem too concerned about it. Then. It is not my place to tell you the current situation of the elemental nations. To be more precisely, I can no longer go to that world. I told you already, I sacrificed a lot to bring you here. The man jumped down the floor before walking towards Naruto. He stopped just inches away before speaking again. I am glad that I revived you and brought you here. Just seeing you in person assures me that you're that person I needed. Can you show me that power that had you hailed as a god? I can't do that, Naruto said simply, but seriously. Even though I saw most of the things you did before bringing you to this world, I don't know the extent on your power now since Kurama's power is available to you without limits, the man responded. My body can't handle it, not now at least. I can't even control it all. I see, the man said before returning to his chair. You forcefully tore the barrier between the first container of magic and second origin. Most advanced wizards learn to use second origin, but you have forced all containers to mix, creating one large container. Unfortunately, this process forced Kurama's power, which you inherited, to combine with your own chakra as the body fought for a way to contain all that power. Right now, because you have neglected training, physically, your body isn't strong enough. Neither is it strong enough to use your magic nor when you combine magic with chakra. If you release the limiters you set up, all that power will be seeping out of your body in a tangible form, and runs the possibility of destroying your body. Single quote. Yet you ask me to show it to you, Naruto added. The man shrugged. You always ridiculed those who couldn't control their power during your demon days. I thought you would fight for control over it just to flout it. You're proud of it, after all. Despite being revered as a demon, you happily wore the armor of a god and still yourself as such. That was the past and it won't take me much effort making my body strong again, Naruto said. Who and what are you? For someone who was saying he didn't have much time left, he was awfully going off topic. But Naruto guessed that the man didn't have to worry about ceasing to exist since he, who he has brought back to life, is right in front of him. During the Dragon Age, I came to exist. I watched humans battle dragons, humans killing each other. I witnessed the birth of Zirf. Before Zirf was, I was. I didn't master dark arts, I simply mastered all forms of magic, with the exception of everything that has to do with black magic. My power grew too much, and I secluded myself away from civilization. During isolation, I continued growing my power to the point where it spiraled out of control, resulting in what you see. I was turned into a ghost. You could say it was my curse for choosing to live in isolation rather than saving the human race during dark hours when I had the power to do so. As a bonus to this curse, my hands can't touch anything of this world, and no one of this world can touch me or even hear me. Because you can't have any direct contact with anyone of this world, you called me, for what purpose? When I lost my body, I realized that I should have taken part in the fight against evil. I saw myself as God because of my power, arrogance grew and I chose not to see myself as a human anymore. I thought there was no need for a god to involve himself with human matters, it was better to allow humans to solve things themselves. Perhaps I simply did not care about my kind, and when came to care, tea was already too late. They did solve things and some peace settled after Zirf disappeared. But over the past years, evil has been accumulating in a mass, and I fear the human race may see its end. You already know of Aknologia. He will someday appear in this world, again, and I tell you, that dragon sees humans as nothing more than insects. He isn't afraid of wiping them out of existence, and he has the power to do so. Although I cannot give you my power, I believe you can save humanity and vanquish all that is evil. Because of your eyes, you can manipulate all forms of magic, and do so much more than anyone in this world can. You're a god after all. Naruto was silent. He was disappointed. He had been thinking of living a normal life, but he was now being forced into the fold because someone who refused to aid humanity back then was trying to make up for his mistakes. He couldn't fault and rebuke this man for his actions. No, everyone does what they think is right. But if we do acknowledge our mistakes, we try to move past them. This is what this man was trying to do. He was trying to make up for what he didn't do back then. All these powers he held, the will to survive, the will to do what was right, it made him the right candidate. Yet Naruto wasn't sure he was ready for the role of being a hero. He had played the villain, and quite honestly, he had excelled in his role as the demon god. Being good, in the eyes of people, would only make him question if he should have done things differently. Naruto had known that he would know his fate by coming to this place. It wasn't like a hammer had been dropped on his shoulders, but he was going to be forced to change a little of his outlook in the fight against evil. I wanted you to see Zirf because I wanted you to understand him a bit more, the ghost said. Naruto appeared to be thinking carefully over this. He didn't fault him though. But he would appreciate it if Naruto understood the situation. Having him see Zirf also helped in this regard. He could only hope that the blonde would willingly accept his new role, even if it meant becoming a demon again to save this world. Naruto sighed tiredly. This was all just troublesome. Any fight against evil, I'm all in, he said rather weakly. I thank you in advance, Naruto. I know that you will not fail. My hope in the survival of humans is in you. When you leave this place, I will cease to exist and you'll never see me again. You will have to forge bonds of your own to keep that evil inside of you from consuming you. You're putting a lot of hope in a single man, Naruto said with a weary smile. That is because I have observed you long enough and know that you're not the type to turn away from those in need, the man said. Though I sacrificed my life so that you can live, your life is still yours. You're free to do what you wish. Naruto simply nodded. I will tell you something you want to know, the ghost said. Yes, it is possible for you to return to your world. You will eventually find the answer. I can only give you this clue. The answer lies in your eyes. If you can gather enough magic, and use your eyes more than you did at the elemental nations, you will find the way. A week later, in front of him stood 5 men with maniacal grins that would be disturbing to anyone, but Naruto had seen it all. There was truly nothing that could scare him. He sighed. He was going to clean the world of vermin. At least he didn't bath the ground with more human blood. These vermin were part of a guild he'd erased from the face of the world, and they'd come for revenge. They only knew it was him because they'd actually witnessed him perform his good deeds. But where did it all start? A month ago, he was enjoying the easy life in the presence of Hisui and Aika. Flashback. Naruto's nose packed up as a smell of morning eggs entered the confines of his small bedroom. He was quickly brought out of his sleep by the sound of steel rubbing against steel, scrambling eggs. His sleep was being cut short by whoever was inside his premises. Sighing, Naruto looked at the time, 8 a.m. He'd only returned home about 3 hours ago, and he was being forced to wake up so early. A yawn escaped from his lips as he outstretched his body. With nothing but boxers on him, Naruto got out of bed and headed towards the small overcrowded kitchen. Aika was busy making herself breakfast. The blonde sighed when he looked at her. He had known her for about 4 months now and has been working with her for that period. He did meet her at work after all. It was around the time staff members for late night shifts were on shortage since the ones who were doing the shifts had quit because of the unbearable working conditions. The drunkards he served were quite persistent in their efforts to grope the workers during weekends since many didn't work around the time. Given that many didn't work, it meant that there were much more customers during weekends than weekdays, and that only meant more trouble for them. Some shameless perverts were not even afraid to slap staff members for refusing to be groped. Aika was a little bit kind, and she didn't possess the kind of stone-hardened heart to fight back with her fists when things were going south. The problem was her financial troubles. He could be wrong when saying she was kind. When people were in dire situations, they tended to do anything, even wearing the mask of kindness to fool people to get what they wanted. Such things were no strange in the shinobi world. But he had also seen it in this world. People did everything they could to secure their riches, to get what they wanted. There was not a corner without darkness. It was just a little better than the elemental nations. The rule of the Magic Council brought some stabilization in criminal mages causing havoc around Earthland. In the elemental nations, villages only cared for their own interests, so even if there was a dangerous criminal on the loose, they wouldn't feel obliged to order the elimination corps. While inside this capital of fury, things were calm and quite refreshing. But people still suffered within this rich place. Aika was suffering. He didn't know her full story, but she had financial troubles. The only reason she kept up with the shit of those drunkards for customers at work was only because she had to. She needed the pay the job gave her. The woman even worked 2 jobs, one during day and another during the night. I didn't know you loved me this much, Aika-chan, Naruto said, walking over to the black-haired woman. To come here in the morning and prepare me breakfast is so sweet. I would marry you right now. Aika turned to face Naruto, her lips pursed into a sad smile before she responded. Not for you, she said. But I wouldn't have a problem in marrying you. Really? Naruto's eyes were a little wide, with a huge grin threatening to break free from its shackles. No, Aika said, crushing all of Naruto's dreams with one slap. You're a pervert who is always ogling every beautiful thing he sees. Honestly, even when you're walking with me, you always look elsewhere when another tramp walks by. Well, at least he didn't go sleeping around. Even though he was always hitting on everything nice he sees, he was never quite serious about anything. If Aika were to be honest with herself, ever since she met him, she had never seen him with a girl inside his apartment. She had never heard any girl from work or any of the loyal customers saying they banged him. That was something, since every time he retires from work, he was always taking a girl back to her home, a drunk lady who probably stuffed her tongue down his throat a couple of times before they even left the bar. No one could deny that he was good looking, and his kind smiles, flirty behavior only ranked up some good points for him. Not every woman liked the kind though. He had consoled a number of customers who were going through a rough patch, and often they tended to throw themselves at him to thank him. Naruto didn't seem to mind hitting anything that has sizable. Although he acted like he didn't, he wasn't actually that much of a obsessed fellow. The thing that brought her closer to him was his kindness, one thing he always shows to everyone, even those who hold a grudge for things that happened at work. He was always the supportive man, always looking out for others. Well, he would probably make a good husband. That wasn't nice, Aika-chan, Naruto said, now standing just away from her, leaning against his refrigerator. What is the occasion? I don't remember giving you spare key for this. Aika didn't respond. She continued to prepare her breakfast. Once finished, she sat down at the dining table, within the crowded kitchen, while Naruto stood still, leaning against the fridge. I am hungry, she simply said. I can see that. Naruto didn't move, he just continued to stare at her as she stuffed down food down her throat. You didn't seem hungry a few hours ago when we was at work. There was something bothering her, otherwise she wouldn't have come here to eat. He had given her his spare key to crash anytime she left she needed him, or just to relax at his place. Her neighborhood was quite hazardous as demons wearing the mask of flesh were always parading around. It was also quite noisy, and wasn't that close to this place. Her situation was what made him always remind her that he worried about her. Although she almost accepted whatever shit that was thrown at her, she never gave up on her desire to live. Regardless of whatever she had to go through in her life, she was always moving forward, striving to improve things, and she had no one. He liked her for that. The fact that she was still fighting meant that she had yet to lose hope. I got evicted, Aika responded without looking at Naruto. Her eyes went towards his couch where there were 3 bags, presumably loaded with clothes only, and I have nowhere to go. This wasn't what he was expecting for this day. He had expected his day to be just fine, problem-free. But he had promised that as long as he could, he would always look after her, he would always offer her his support and help. Promises were sacred oaths he held very highly, and it wouldn't do well to his conscience to break them. Where are the rest of your stuff? Naruto asked as he sat across her. I sold them. Aika paused for a moment to swallow her food, her eyes still didn't meet Naruto's. I needed the jewels, but it wasn't enough to get a new place. When did this happen? She looked fine when they were working, and she couldn't have been evicted this morning since she wouldn't have the time to sell her furniture. This only led him to a conclusion that she had been without a place to stay for a few days now and she has been wandering around. Her presence here only meant that he was her only hope. A few days ago, she refused to be precise with her response. But this time, she looked at Naruto straight in the eyes, and all he saw was a sad and tired young lady who had seen too much already. I hope your offer still stands. A sad smile formed as she waited for his response. I'd never turn you down, Aika-chan. After all, I did give you a key to this place, Naruto said in a warm tone. Like I said before, if you want to make this your home, you're welcome to stay here as long as you want. Aika managed a small happy smile. Thank you, Naruto, she said. You know, I might just end up marrying you. Her eyes were closed, to hide whatever was in them, and the smile on her face didn't really reveal anything. That wouldn't be so bad, Naruto responded before letting loose another yawn. He really needed to get some sleep, but he just continued to watch Aika eat until she finally finished her meal. The black-haired looked at him. You won't even ask me why I couldn't afford my rent when I have 2 jobs, she stated. He didn't really bug her to get the inner details of her story. And he didn't go around snooping to get details on his own. It wasn't that he hadn't asked her before, he had, but she didn't say much and he said he would respect her privacy and allow her to tell him when she was ready. I told you already. I want you to tell me the rest of your story on your own, not because I pressured you to do so. I want you to be free, Naruto said quietly with a smile. Comfortable silence settled in as Aika gathered her thoughts. I already told you that I have no family left, but I didn't tell you how it came to be like that. Naruto nodded. I didn't pester as I was satisfied with just knowing that there was someone like me, someone who had no one. He was alone in this world. Even in the elemental nations, he only had Mei when he was making history. Even though the woman tried all best to be there for him, her love didn't patch all the gaping holes inside his heart. Friends and family were needed. His line of work left him without friends. The only people he could call family were those liars, Jiraiya and Tsunade. The old man had been his family, but he sort of lost that when the man was revealed to be a deceitful old fart who only thought of the good of Konoha. Being in this world, he had no connections with anyone. He was all alone, just like her. I was happy too. You have no one, but you're always smiling, and looking out for others, Aika said. If there is an important lesson I have learned about life, it is that happiness you create for yourself. Everybody have their own mountains to climb, everyone has a problem to solve. When you start comparing yourself with others, you only serve to give yourself more problems and stress. When you're faced with a burden, no matter how heavy it is, always try to look forward. No matter how many times you fall, always try to get up. There is no shame in grabbing someone for support. Taking that step only means you recognize your limits and that you need someone to help you out. Lying down to mope doesn't solve anything. But what you, Aika, are doing will solve something. Don't ever let the things on your shoulders stop you from smiling. Carrying burdens only mean you carry an extra weight, it doesn't mean you have to allow it to suck out your happiness. So long as you have hope, you can always smile. I don't know how many times I've heard you say those words, but every time I hear them, it feels like it is the first time I hear them, Aika said with a smile. It wasn't a sad smile. There are times when I feel like giving up and just sell myself to prostitution or just die. Regardless of how much money I earn, regardless of how much effort I put, I am always reminded that I have no freedom, my life is not for my own. No matter where I run off to, they always find me. Yet, you're still alive and striving for your freedom. Aika nodded. There is a little voice inside of me that tells me to keep moving, she said before taking a pause. My parents were very wealthy. It was just me, mother and father. But all that changed when they were killed when I was young. Things wouldn't have been so bad because they'd left everything to me. But it turned out that they were involved with some bad people. I was told that they were murdered because they weren't cooperating as they were supposed to. All their wealth was taken away from me by those people and I was left with nothing. My grandmother took me away to her village and took care of me until I grew up. When I did grow up, she sent me away from the village and I went to a town. For at least a year I enjoyed the town life. A few months ago, my grandmother got sick. I had to go back home to look after her. But when I went back home, my grandmother's house was empty, everything was gone. I only found a letter from some people whom my parents supposedly owed. The people who took everything from me weren't the only people my parents were involved with. The reason they didn't as bothered when I was still younger is because they were still searching for me as they wanted to use me as collateral, and they were still fighting with the first group. When they lost, they upped their efforts in finding me. When they finally found us, my grandmother promised to pay the debt in monthly installments. She sent me away because she knew she couldn't keep up with the installments and eventually, those people would use me. She didn't want for me, she wanted me to be happy. When I finally met those people, I was given two choices, they either sold me or I worked the debt little by little for the rest of my life. They took my grandmother away for safekeeping, while I worked the debt. I would see her each time I made the monthly payment. Before I moved in here, they stopped allowing me to see her because my payments were too low. But since she was sick before they took her, I knew she had probably died since they probably didn't good care of her. And so, I ran away and came here. But they still found me, and beat me up while threatening to sell me to slavery if I ever ran again. I had to get 2 jobs because of it. I was told that my debt was lifelong, and until I died, I would still pay. The money she was making couldn't be much to keep them from doing anything. Unless she was getting them 20 million joules every month, then it would be understandable. Her day job did make a lot of money. Naruto concluded that those people had many people like her who they extort money from. If they had like a 100 people under their thumb paying around 500,000 joules a month, then they wouldn't sell her to slavery. Selling her would only bring them once-off money, but this way, money entered their pockets every month, keeping a good flow of cash. Did you get the names of these people? Aika looked at Naruto curiously before responding. They called themselves the Dark Sith. I haven't heard of them. Then again, he had been cooped up with this place to give an eye on what happened outside. We will figure something out, Aika-chan, and I assure you, I will help you solve this matter, even if it means wearing the mask of God to grant your wish. Aika looked at Naruto with a somewhat amused look on her face. The mask of God. Don't make a promise you can't keep, Naruto. She just couldn't picture someone like him wearing a mask of God. But he did make many wishes come true. Naruto Uzumaki always stays true to his promise. Naruto exclaimed as he stood up. He walked over to Aika and took her plate before placing it on the sink. He then returned to her side. She wasn't going to her day job, which only meant she had been fired for sleeping at work. But he wasn't going to bring it up. He gave her his hand. We worked all night, and you must not have slept since you had to get your things and then come here. Let us go to bed, we'll talk about our living arrangements after we have rested. Your hand. Well, you're depressed and your situation has me worked up, and I am really tired. On top of that, I only have one bed, and I'm not going to sleep on the couch. We can comfort each as we drift to sleep. Aika sighed and took his hand. Well, it wouldn't anything we haven't done before, she said. She was not worried of Naruto taking advantage of the situation to get between her legs. She had shared a bed with him on a few occasions and he didn't do anything. Though, sometimes she wished he did. Naruto. Hisui was too busy today to see him. Well, he had others matters to deal with and he wouldn't have been able to fully focus on her while he was troubled by Aika's situation. As long as those people continued to live, she would be suffering, and they would eventually do more than beat her up. He didn't want any of that for her. He wanted her to be free from her tormentors. She was working, but didn't enjoy the fruits of her sweat because some people enjoyed ripping where they didn't sow. Naruto had been too ignorant of things since coming here. While the elemental nations had shinobi villages, this world had guilds which were homes to mages. Just as when they wore forehead protectors to show that they were shinobi and of a certain village, mages had guild insignia to show that they were from which guild. These guilds were spread all over Earthland, and if Naruto wanted, he could have made a home in any of these guilds. He was positive that life wouldn't have been so bad. He had lived as a shinobi in Konoha while keeping a happy face because he was happy. Being a mage wasn't all that bad. But it didn't offer him a chance to live a normal life, hence his choice to stay over here and ignore the guilds. There weren't just good guilds around Fury, there were also dark guilds. The title says it all. You expect a dark guild to be doing what is called evil and everything that has to do with darkness. On his way to the capital, he'd come across one of these despicable guilds who are formed with the idea of doing that which is evil and he'd dealt with it accordingly. But since then, he had stopped looking out there, keeping a blind eye on the dark alleys of the capital, and choosing to look at the happy smiles of some who chose to live happily. But he couldn't ignore it anymore. He wasn't going to do anything drastic though. He would try to negotiate with these people before doing anything. Sometimes it was better to communicate than to use fists outright. Diplomatic didn't usually work in the shinobi world, though. Shinobi only listened when a kunai was pressed against their necks. He hoped it would be a little different. But the hope was little. He needed to get millions of jewels to settle Aika's debt. He already had a couple of millions from his savings since he didn't really do much with his monthly pay. Before he had even come to the capital, he had a couple of million jewels which he only used to furnish his small apartment. His rent wasn't even that high and he had no responsibilities whatsoever. He had many ways to get the jewels he needed, all good ways. He could join a guild and do many jobs. He could sell some of his products to willing buyers. Joining a guild wasn't on his cards at this moment. Selling some of his products was going to do it. And he knew who would be willing to buy, and probably cough up a couple of millions in jewels. Since Hisui was busy, he could use this chance to get it done. Sighing, Naruto walked away from the library and headed towards the royal castle. He wasn't going to see Hisui, she didn't even know that he'd set foot in the place before. When a stranger arrives in the capital and quickly befriends the princess and even develop a working relationship with her, the higher-ups in the royal family become suspicious. Even he would be suspicious about who his child was hanging out with. Naturally, the head of the royal guard approached him one day and brought him to the castle to discuss a few things. Basically, he had been called for an interrogation. For obvious reasons, the princess wasn't told about it. It wasn't that Hisui was a puppet in the royal family. No, it wasn't like that. Hell, the young lady had more authority than anyone other than the king himself. Even the prime minister listens to her. She probably had more brains than chief of the royal guard. Once Naruto reached the gates of the castle, he told the guards who he was and whom he wanted to speak to. The guards had him wait while contact was made with the man he wanted to see. It wasn't long before the man himself came to fetch him. He was just as tall as him, fair-skinned, and of a good build. He also looked like a middle-aged man. His hair was short, a few threads hanging over his forehead, and he had small black eyes. He was wearing the usual royal guard uniform, but carried no weapon. Naruto, the man started with a smile. Come on with me. Naruto really didn't like the kind of smile this man gave him. There were many snakes in this world and in the previous. There was no hiding from them. No matter where you go, you're always going to come across this kind of people. This man cared little less for him, he cared about doing his job as head of the royal guard. These were the kind of people who'd probably discard their family and everyone else for the sake of their jobs. It was a bit hypocrite of him to think of such. He did after all discard his friends in favor of seeing through his goal. Perhaps the man was even better than him. He had something to offer, and this man had been patiently waiting for it. His abilities with seals was known to these people as they made it their business to know everything they can, for security reasons they would say. He could be wrong, and this man wouldn't throw him out once he gave what he had to offer. The times of peace have dulled his once sharp senses and he was probably rusty in fighting since he hasn't fought during the 6 months period he had been here. Naruto continued to keep his silence as they walked within the passages of the castle heading towards the royal guard facilities. You're awfully quiet, Takada said. But I am told that you're a rather talkative person when with the princess. There wasn't a hint of anything. What Naruto did know about this man was that he cared for the empire, and was loyal to the royal family. He had lived with betrayers long enough to be able to sport them even when his once sharp senses have now dulled. Time and place, Naruto offered his response in a quiet tone. The place mattered and he wasn't familiar with this man to start bubbling about this and that. He had only met him when he came to look at some of his fine work as the princess had said he did some excellent work. He was a willing buyer for the royal guard, but back then, he had refused to sell. He had to do it now. I didn't think you minded such things, if your actions towards the princess are anything to go by, the man said, looking at Naruto at the corner of his right eye. My actions towards the princess. He hadn't done anything wrong to Hisui. He has been nothing but a good and loyal partner to her. He always respected the boundaries, well, in most cases. Takada nodded. You seem to have grown rather close to her enough to invade her personal space. Of course he had heard of the incident that occurred a few days ago. He didn't have anything particularly against it. It was somewhat refreshing to know. We get along quite well and sometimes I get a little too excited. Naruto paused for a moment to ask a question. Is it wrong to be in the personal space of the princess? I'd imagine that it would be a problem to the royal family to have a nobody getting a little too close to the Princess of Fury. Takada chuckled lightly while shaking his head. What do you think of her? Naruto didn't have to think twice to offer his response. She is a kind young lady who loves her country. She is willing to do anything to protect it and has the heart to make decisions that have to be taken by someone in authority. She is also rather intelligent for her age. Well said, Takada said with a smile. It is because of what you say that the king permits the princess to do as she likes. She doesn't report to her father when she is doing her experiments, not even when she uses large amounts of gold to buy the equipment she needs. Hisui Haim is not a child, and everyone knows she can make decisions on her own. If she doesn't have a problem with you invading her personal space, then we will accept that. Personally, I have nothing against you. You're not doing anything to draw her away from her duties as a princess. In fact, you help her. But if you were standing in the way, then we would have problems. He already knew that Hisui wasn't just seen as the child of the king. She wasn't just a young woman, she was a capable leader who is responsible and loyal to her country. She didn't seem to realize it herself that she was trusted with almost everything. Her father would probably give her the reins and very few would complain about it. She commanded noteworthy respect from everyone in the royal castle. That is good to know, Naruto finally responded with a sigh. Perhaps he had been wrong about this man. He appeared to have no problems with his relationship with Hisui as long as she did her job and didn't bring shame to the country because of him. Why do you think that Princess Hisui's personal guard is able to leave you alone with her without worrying about her safety? The job of a guard is to be an attendee of him/her that he guards at all times. In fact, as long as the princess is outside this castle, her guard must always be watching her movement. Failure to do so is incompetence. If something were to happen to the princess while he guard wasn't by her side, then he would have to account to it. The man risks much by allowing the princess to be with Naruto alone. If evil people were to be on the loose, running after the princess's life, then someone would be needed to fight them. If the personal guard wasn't there, who would fight for the safety of the princess? The princess said something about it being safe with me. I imagine it is because she knows I have no cruel intentions towards her. If there was little suspicion, I believe I would have been removed away from her some time ago, Naruto responded with a thoughtful look. That is part of it, Takada said. We have indeed checked everything about you, but aside from a few incidents some months ago, there has been nothing about you. It is like you just popped out of the blue. We're not concerned about it though. After studying your activities in the past months, we have concluded that you're an honest person. This is why you're allowed to spend time with the princess. Naruto nodded. He would be surprised if they suddenly said they knew where he came from. His background would remain a mystery until the time is right to spill the beans. It was still understandable that they'd go through all lengths to protect the princess. She was the future of Fury after all. The main reason I have no fears of the princess's safety is because I know you're a mage, a capable one for that matter. The bomb was dropped. Naruto didn't show any physical reaction to it, nor did the expression on his face change. He had experienced too much to lose his composure. So far, he only showed skills in runes seals. He never told anyone he was a fighter. There was a limiter on him that he set to avoid the power he had inherited from leaking. Only someone with fine eyes would be able to sense some of his own monstrous magic, not to mention he still had chakra. How do you figure? Takada smiled.